Hello everyone, my name is Noel DeBona. Welcome to the show Win Today with Noel. We're going to dive into the election process of breaking down the numbers. And this is very important to understand that your numbers and what you need to know, how many people are going to come out and vote in your election, is very important to understand the process of it. We're going to break it down into, obviously, the state that you live in, county, district, city, town, ward, precinct, street, and house. Let me break that down for you. Obviously, your county or district, what involves throughout your territory, your city or town, your ward, and a lot of these times we'll talk about throughout today's show is precincts. We're going to break it down into precincts. Almost every election process has it broken down that way. Sometimes you obviously talk about overlapping that with the ward in some of the cities, and then you can break it down into streets, and then obviously your house, where the voter comes out of. Now, breaking down the numbers, just for the sake of today's argument today, is 60,000 registered voters. Let's just say, quote unquote, you have 100,000 people in that district. 60,000 of them are registered voters. And how do you break down those numbers? What do you think is going to come out for this election that you're in? Most of the time in a presidential election, you're going to get between 55 and 75% of the vote come out, which is a very high percentage. And those are your presidential election people, your 2016, your 2012s, and obviously getting into 2020 down the road. Those are bigger type of elections, and people turn out a lot heavier in those elections based on absentee, just based on getting out, every 4 years is the presidential election. Very, 4 years. Sometimes you get a lot of 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20s. There might be their first time voting as well. So you get a higher turnout. If you get 30,000 people that come out and turn out, you're going to get 50%. Some of the other local elections, you'll get a 33%, which is 20,000 people come out and vote. 15,000 is obviously 25% of the vote. And in your lower tiers, you only get 6,000 people come out. It'd be 10,000 upon 10%, and 20% is actually 12,000. So you need to figure out where in your election do you think is going to be the turnout. You would have to base that on prior elections. You'd have to obviously base that out as well as weather conditions. If it's a really rainy or a stormy day and you have some type of weather conditions, it could lower the voters that come out. So absentees, you got to figure out how many absentee voters are going to come out and vote prior to the election. In this day and age and process, there seems to be more people that are just very busy on election day that want to vote earlier. So they're going to try to make that process a little bit better for people. How are you going to map this out, and how are you going to strategically go at this? We'll go down to the bottom part of the screen, and we'll talk about your 30 precincts. Just for the sake of the 60,000 voters, registered voters, let's just say there's 30 precincts that are involved in the voter process. Out of those 30 precincts, you got to figure out what your top 10s are. What are the top precincts in your area that are going to come out and vote? And then also you got to figure out what are your bottom 10 precincts that are going to come out to vote. Now there's two different strategies in that process. Are you going to spend more of your time in the higher precincts that are going to be a higher turnout, or do you do it on the lower half? Now I've seen people spend a lot more time in the higher precincts just based on time management. Hey, listen, there's going to be more voters that are going to come out in this particular area. I'm going to spend a little bit more time in that. Or you can think that if you're running against an incumbent, they may not want to go to the bottom 10s. They may say, you know what, those bottom 10s, I rarely ever come out. You might be running against an incumbent that's been in office for the last three terms, 5 terms. They might say, you know what, those bottom 10s, he or she never goes out to and really contacts those people in those 10. And those 10 might be the difference. That if you go out and you knock on those doors, or you spend a little bit more time phone banking and calling those areas, you may be able to sway that vote total to come into your area. Obviously, it's the other way around with your top 10s, your top 5s, is those were the higher percentage of people that are going to come out for your election. So there's two different strategies on it, and based on your election and what you're going to do with your campaign team, your campaign manager, your whole strategy to do that is based on that. And time management is very important. Now, how do you level down of what the voters that are going to come out to vote? Obviously, in certain elections, you want to look back at the last 8 years. Now, if you can't get back for the last 8 years, you want to get back at least your last 4 years of voter turnout. And you can get those at your clerk's office, city or town or your state. You can get that voter lists, and you need to strategize it on figuring out how to see which people came out for which election. And you can buy certain voter lists, Nation Builder and all these different companies that do that. But you need to actually have some type of algorithm or coding to put in each election. And you can just do that if you just by looking at it. At least go for the last 2 elections, the last 2 election cycles, last 2 years. But 4 years out is probably the best. 8 years out is unbelievable to have that type of data. And based on that, you're also going to look at your even and odd years. Your even years are your state elections. We just talked about the presidential election, 2016, 2012. Also in between there is your 14 and 10. And coming out in this year is 2018. So your 16s and 12s are your presidential elections, and the other even years or your state elections. But then you have your local elections, which is a little different race in itself, which is your 17, 15, 13s, and 11s. Those are the local years, and those are the off even years. In some other selectmen races and other local elections that are really, your voter turnout, your voter percentage of people, obviously some of those elections are happening in April, just past May. There are a lot of less registered voters in those elections, and you don't really gauge it on that based on this type of, whether you're running in a state election, Republican and Democratic election, which is coming out in this obviously September and November process. You got to look at the fact of what voters do you have. There's the super voters, they're sometimes called A voters. For the sake of the argument, let's just talk about the last 4 elections. If they've voted in the last 4 elections in 4 election processes, 4 out of 4, they're considered a super or an A voter. Well, those people are definitely going to probably be coming out and vote. Those are the particular voters that you need to target to get to. And there's a lot of different ways of doing that. We'll talk about the criteria. There's also the B voters. Let's say they came out for the last 3 of the 4 elections. Your mid voters, which are your mid voters, they may come out, they may not come out, is 2 for 2. And then your 1 out of 4 voters is your 4th bottom. They may have come out for a presidential election, but the probability of them coming out for these other elections is very, very low. So where do you spend your time? You obviously know that your A voters are going to come out and vote. You really have to target them, and you really have to get to them in certain different ways. And you can do that by direct mail, you can do that by door knocking, or phone banking. And I would prefer all 3. You need to get to them in all 3 different avenues. And maybe sometimes you need to door knock them twice. You need to also direct mail them quite a bit of times. And then if you're phone banking, if you're phone calling them, you need to really target in because they're going to come out and vote. Now, a lot of different times inside a household, you may get 5 registered voters. And the probability is if the mother and father are very good voters, the probability is that they pass that on to their children as well. Sometimes you can get a 5-voter house. But sometimes you also get the fact that spouses, sometimes you'll get mom will come out and vote a lot more than dad, and dad doesn't vote as much as mom. So you have to pull those other people inside the household to come out and vote. And sometimes when you do direct mail, it's household, Jones household, Smith household. You're trying to direct mail all 5 of the people inside that house. And then there's some households that obviously only have 1 or 2, just a couple or a single person that comes out and votes. But those are your big ones. If you can get 4, 5, 6 people inside of a household, you really need to target them a lot of different avenues. You might come up to the door and door knock it, and you may talk to Mrs. Jones, but you still haven't talked to the rest of the group. And as you're leaving, you should obviously say, would you please let the rest of the family know that I've come by and knocked on the door. So there's a lot of different ways of doing that. Phone banking, obviously you're going to call them. There's other avenues which I call the blanket or the umbrella, which is you're not really targeting them, but you're overlapping it like a blanket. And those different ways are TV, radio, and newspaper. You don't particularly know how you're targeting it. It's umbrella overlap. But you want to obviously get to the 3-touch rule. Is if they've seen your yard sign out, or they've gotten some type of direct mail from you, and then all of a sudden they hear you on the radio, or they see you on TV, it's that 3-touch rule. Oh, all of a sudden, I know who this person is who's running for office. I finally hit it after the 3rd, 4th, 5th time of hearing the name or seeing the name somewhere out there. You're going to get out there and do a flyer drop or a literature drop, and I would do the blanket, especially in the top 10 precincts, is the blanket, which is some of those houses will be super voters, some of those houses will be 1 out of 4 voters. How you get those people to turn out is very important. Maybe they come out, they see something on your literature drop that they really like about you, or they've met you before, and you're pushing them out. You're getting their email address. You're calling them back. Election day, you have a team out there that's getting to those people via email, via phone call the day before, the day of the election, and polling, getting people out to vote. And that's what can make a difference in your race. Also, it's the umbrella is the robocalls. Whatever phone numbers you have, and they're making it a lot more difficult nowadays. They don't want you calling on robocalls with cell phones, and sooner or later there'll be some type of law adjustment that'll make you and not allow you to do that. So over time, things will evolve and change, but you need to take advantage of almost every single criteria to try to get to your voters and turn them out. If you look at your whole election cycle, you have to break down when you're going to start and when you're going to end. And the sooner that you get out there and start your election process down to election day, the better chance you're going to have to win your race, if you can strategically map it out. A lot of people wait until down the stretch and they say, well, it's a little too early to get out there. Let me tell you something right now to the viewer. It's never too early to get out there and start working in your election. And people will tell you that the old-fashioned way, you can wait till a month out, 2 months out. You'll have that sleeper. And this is why I'm doing the show today and talking to you, the viewer. There's a lot more of the millennials and the X's and the Y's that are out there taking on bigger incumbents that have been in seats for a very long time. They want to unseat them. There's a movement going on, and that's why I'm talking to you today. There is a movement going on throughout the United States, throughout the world, that the millennials and the Gen X's and the Gen Y's are coming out and they're taking on these incumbents. And maybe they don't take them out in this particular election cycle, but let me tell you something right now, they're there to take it over. And in this day and age with technology and social media and different ways of marketing yourself, sometimes you ever look at the end of an election cycle and you say, how did that person win? They didn't have a better resume. They don't even have a master's degree or a doctorate or a law degree. How did this person win? They don't even have a degree. You figure that out and you say to yourself, technology is changing everything. And that's why I'm out here talking today for the movement. You can get out there and you can beat people based on all these different criterias and the technology and the social media that we have today. So if you want to get strategically mounted and you want to find a way to do that, email me today, wintodayWithNoel@gmail.com, and I can help you evolve your system and put everything together based on you, based on if you've run before or what election cycle you're going to be in. But it's never too late to start. And I can tell you right now, the incumbents have to be a little concerned with what's going on in the world today with technology, because it's changing the face of elections and politics today. Because if you can market yourself to look the part and go in and actually do it and win, it's unbelievable. And it's happening all over the United States, all over the world. You're seeing elections with upsets. And I'm looking forward to talking to you. Email me today, talk a little bit more about strategy. And I want to thank everybody for watching the show. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.